Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and today I want to explore how businesses can accelerate innovation. And what inspired this topic today is when I read that 89% of CIOs say digital transformation has accelerated, and 58% believe it will continue to speed up. But on the flip side, organisations are struggling to keep up with the fast pace of innovation. So what if partnering with academia could help bring in new knowledge, fresh thinking, and a novel way of working, and bring all that into a business to help accelerate the change towards new digital frontiers? The problem traditionally has been that these partnerships are often viewed as a CSR initiative rather than being a core part of the R&D process, which limits their potential. So today I've invited Alois Reitbauer back onto the podcast from Dynatrace to talk about the business value of forging stronger links and his belief that academic partnerships can drive more meaningful impact if they sit firmly within a business, and how it can help provide more direction and enable academic partners to dedicate research efforts to solving current or pressing business challenges, which, let's be honest, can't be solved in a classroom. So what if organisations did start creating joint innovation teams, including university researchers, developers and other business stakeholders with practical knowledge of a company's systems, processes and vision? Sounds like a tech utopia, doesn't it? Why have we not thought of this before? So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Austria, where Alois is waiting to join us once again on Tech Talks Daily, but this time to talk about accelerating innovation. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. For anyone that missed our conversation last year, can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hello. My name is Alois Reitbauer. I'm the Chief Technical Strategist at Dynatrace. And in this role, I'm responsible for everything we do around open source, innovation projects, engagement with communities, with standardization. So pretty much everything that's not like core product development, but more outgoing and also obviously driving some next generation product developments here at Dynatrace.
And so much has changed in the last 12 months since we spoke. You had the Dynatrace Perform event, which was virtual. You guys did a great job of that as well, can I say? There was a virtual wine tasting event, etc. Everything seemed to work brilliantly, but obviously it's not as good as being in person and speaking with people on the show floor. But I'm curious, what's been keeping you busy since our last chat? What have you been focusing on?
Yeah, interestingly, you mentioned like these virtual wine events. There was also a whiskey event, which you might have then missed.
Oh, man. No.
That was a very good one as well. Yeah. So, as you know, Dynatrace is a software intelligence company, which means we like monitor applications. And obviously, over the last 2 years, a lot was going on. Monitoring applications, helping people to develop their digital presences and supporting them in moving more to a digital online model. The last time we spoke was about scaling up to the requirements for COVID when people had to rapidly scale up their applications. This was more or less overnight. So we obviously invested a lot in making it easier for companies to run applications. We were working with a lot of companies, helping them modernize their applications and build more automation in there. Because interestingly, a lot of companies then wanted to move into a more like digital presence or more IT-heavy business model, but it was still hard to find people. So like helping them to do more with the people that they already have was a key topic. And also on the product side, we added our application security module, and more or less just in time, as what we've heard over the last year from more and more security vulnerabilities popping up, because obviously as more transactions are running digital, there's more interest for hacking applications, software supply chain management becoming more of a topic there. And also our cloud automation module was launched, which like builds exactly this automation that people needed. So it's like really broadening the scope of what we were doing. for our customers to even cover more use cases for them, and always have this strong focus on doing as much of all the work automatically, and helping them to focus on delivering their core business value to their customers.
And as the head of Innovation Lab at Dynatrace, you're responsible for Dynatrace Research. So can you tell me a little bit more about the work and your approach to innovation? Because I think if you go inside any organisation, just saying the word innovation will have about 6 different definitions. But how do you approach it at Dynatrace?
Yeah, we always, obviously, we're looking forward to like building new product features and innovating. And I think that's at the core of what a lot of companies are doing. And we always are working on the one hand, like innovating on the core product, looking into next generation product features, and also working with research organizations like universities. Mm-hmm. But over the last 2 years, this became way more structured, and I developed internally for us at Dynatrace this framework where I'm looking at product development more or less in 3 generations and 3 phases. So like the first phase is like this current product generation, which I call generation N. So obviously, as a technologist, I'm not very creative on names, so we just start somewhere. So this is everything that's really customer focused, usually has a time to market of 3 to 6 months, with the goal to ship it rapidly and have immediately supporting a new use case at a customer, having new functionality. And then there's generation N+1. So these are things that, or functionalities that might not immediately lead to revenue, but they are still customer focused. Some of them are more bets, whether they will work out and will not work out. Like if you see a new technology appearing in the market, what could you do? What could you build around it? So the focus here is somewhat between 1 to 2, sometimes 3 years, depending on how the technology also evolves, because especially in this N+1 generation, it doesn't just depend when you have a product ready, but also when the technology is adopted by the market. So as we all know, this depends on where companies are, what they want to do when a new technology enters the market. And then there's Dynatrace Research. And the idea behind Dynatrace Research was really building technology that we know we will need in 5 years. So suddenly the focus changes. So the focus is no longer directly for the customer, but building technology that we at Dynatrace need. The focus then is, as I mentioned, like 5 years out, but it starts from 3 to 5 years, but closely working with our core R&D and development teams. And the idea there is really like solving some hard problems, which we know we can, or we're not immediately going to address today, but we know we have to address in 3 to 5 years. And I think for every technology company, so when you start out, you usually like have this like one big creative idea what you're doing, or like this one big key technology that you bring into market that you most likely have already worked on a couple of years. But the more you evolve, the bigger your environments, in our case, get that we're monitoring, and the more advanced the use cases get, the more you realize that you have to build more and more of a technology stack yourself that you usually used to rely on existing technologies. And that's really where Dynatrace is, where we put the real hard problems and then tell people, okay, find solutions for this problem, because what we know is out there is not working because we already tried it in engineering.
Love that. And another thing that really stands out about what you guys are doing here is you're thinking 5 years in advance, and also with academic partnerships as well, which is incredibly cool. And do you think that approach, looking towards academia, exemplifies that broader need for IT industries to champion closer collaboration between the business and academia, and looking further into the future and showing that we're ready and not just reacting in 3 to 5 years? So
the 5 years are an interesting time frame for us. So we have been around now for over 15 years, like as Dynatrace, and the various phases of Dynatrace. And even our CTO recently gave an interview where he mentioned 7 years. But there's this 5 to 7 years time frame that in which you usually have to reinvent whatever product you're building. That doesn't mean that the product is getting worse. It's just times change. Technologies change. Like if you think back like 5 years ago when we talked about remote work, then how we talk about it today, if we see the development of mobile devices, if you look at cloud computing, so the world is like changing. And usually in this phase, like every 5 to 7 years, you have to more or less rebuild the product from scratch. And that's how it comes along. And usually you know that certain assumptions that you have taken 5 years ago or certain characteristics of environments no longer hold right now and will no longer hold in 5 years. And it's kind of like a bit anticipating the future, but some changes are obvious. Like in our area, we know that the size of the environments which we're monitoring is constantly increasing. I remember when I started at Dynatrace, when we talked like 100 JVMs, like 100 Java processes, what a big environment. Then we said 1,000, what a big environment. Then we said 100,000, and today you say 100,000. That's your test environment. So production might be a couple of millions, and how these environments change behavior is different. And this is not only true, obviously, for your own technology, but also the technologies that you rely on. So whether these are certain frameworks that you use for data storage and other areas. And the interesting thing is that on the academia side, you find very interesting ideas of how you could solve problems differently. But very often they are not, or also by design, they're not necessarily focused on how this is used in a real world scenario or in a business scenario, or in a specific application scenario. And this is where the collaboration fits together. Like we have a problem and we say, well, this solution does no longer work, what's out there? And then you find that this technology or this approach that was developed in academia, which usually doesn't work or is not mature enough to be used in a commercial product. And then you bring those two together and figure out some new solution that you can then later on put into a product. So we see it more as a scouting what's out there, what does already exist, but what might not be yet mature enough, which ideas are out there that provide entirely different solutions to problems we might have. And that's this really nice synergy because it's really a symbiotic relationship. As a technology company, you know that you have certain approaches and you want to get new ideas of how you could solve problems and how to build that next generation of product that you want to build. So you have the problems, but you might not know all the ideas that are out there, especially in academia and early stage research. Academia, on the other hand, has a lot of ideas, but they're missing the real world use cases. So bringing both of them together is like really this symbiotic relationship that allows to usually create some very cool technology that can then be used in the real world. Just think of how AI evolved over even decades until where we are today. And then we have very specific problems that we wanted to solve. And now we're applying it to more and more of those problems.
And I know that's a topic very close to your heart. And I think before you came on, one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was that belief that academic partnerships can actually drive meaningful impact if they sit firmly within the business. Is that something that you're really passionate about driving at the moment?
Yeah, we want to have it close to really the business ideas, and I think that's where they should be.
Yeah.
And I think there should be space for both, honestly. So there is this idea of freedom of research, which is very important, that you can really do blue sky research. You just try something out and you try to invent something really and come up with a great idea and then see what happens. I think that's important. This should be out there. And I can speak locally here, but I think it's pretty much the same in every country. There are dedicated programs for this. But then there's this other part of research where people just get started on research, and then you have this transition from research to applying research. And that's usually the hard part, because the researchers often have a problem to describe the technology that they built in a way that maybe some people in the industry understand how they could be useful. Some might understand it, but a lot of them might not understand it. I remember some of my first presentations I had about AI technologies that were developed that we then later on incorporated into the product. These were charts on how effective the algorithms were, and they were super excited. But if I would show it to you, you would just see, okay, these are 500 charts with hundreds of dots on them. So what does this even mean? Yeah. But when you then go into the details, say this algorithm is 10 times faster analyzing a massive data set and discovering the root cause of a performance problem, then it becomes way more applicable. And this collaboration, I think, makes sense for both sides, so for the business side and the academia side. But it also needs a specific environment. That was very important for us, because you're in between this, okay, you're taking some freedom away from researcher because you take focusing them on an industry problem. And at the same time, from a pure business perspective, you have to be honest with also your stakeholders that this is not something we will put into the product in the next year. Mm. By the way, we might also figure out that it doesn't work at all, but then at least we know that this does not work. So you have to create this in-between zone of where you have this flexibility on the one hand, and also start to direct research into another area. And I think it's very important for both sides to have a very good understanding of what this collaboration looks like, that they're happy and that the results are then obviously what both sides expect.
And a couple of stats that I saw recently, I just wanted to share with you. And one was 89% of CIOs say digital transformation has accelerated. No big surprises there. And 58% believe it will continue to speed up. Again, no big surprises. But for any business leaders listening, how can they accelerate innovation? Because I think they're all in this world together at the moment. They know what they need to do. But getting that train moving faster, that's the hard bit, isn't it?
I think the acceleration, so what I've seen a lot, that the problem so far is not acceleration, but just keeping up with the pace at which they need to move. I think that my first recommendation, which I also have in a lot of customer conversations, is get rid of toil, get rid of the work that you should no longer be doing. Like, try to find everything that's repeatable, that's automatable, and get it out of people's way. You're not going to hire 200 more engineers, because you simply won't find them, except maybe if you're in a very fortunate situation. But really focus on what's driving innovation in your business. And I think the second one is really try to understand your industry, try to understand the status quo, and then figure out what would you have to build that this status quo would be so yesterday. It's just last week, I think it was last week, the announcement of Elon Musk about his humanoid robot. Yeah, everybody might be laughing about it because he hasn't built it yet, but he's just, okay, let's build this thing, because if we're going to build this, everybody will be super amazed. And that's kind of, I think, the mindset that you need as a business, and to really give digital transformation a meaning. Like, look at the best in breed, what your industry can do today, whether it's banking, finance, travel, doesn't really matter. Then come up with a solution that would make them say, oh my God, we don't even know how to build this. And then break it down into smaller steps. But one thing you will realize, that there's so much to build, that just everything that like keeps running what you have today, you really have to get this as automated as possible and really refocus the energy of the people who you're working with. So I think that's, for me, really the core of digital transformation. It's not putting processes online. Yeah. It's really changing the way people consume a service, or how people engage with your products, and really like have this new experience in doing things. And they can't think of any other way of doing it, and really like having this massive change in how to interact, obviously, to the better.
And just to bring to life a couple of things that we're talking about here, do you have any examples of how academics can create solutions that truly change the world, instead of that old way, that status quo you were talking about, of developing a theory that then takes years to be tested? Is there any examples that you've got that you could share? Yeah,
so like an example on the Dynatrace side here, and how this actually works. Again, this is a process on how you think it through. So we usually, mostly always start from the customer side. Like, what do we have to do differently? How do we see certain parameters change in the future? That's how we were back in the days investing into our AI-powered analysis capabilities, where everybody told us this is totally bonkers to do it that way. That doesn't make any sense. It's never going to work. So usually when somebody tells you it's never going to work, it's actually a good sign, because they can't see it yet and they don't know how to build it. So if you have already an idea how it could potentially work, you like most likely 4 or 5 steps ahead. But what you then realize, you really start from this use case, and in some cases we even did videos like small movies of how we anticipate the world to be in like 5 years from now. And not just something we did, a lot of companies like Microsoft and others do it as well. And then you break it down, what you actually have to build to make this work. So then you put engineers on the problem. Okay, this works. We have no idea how to do this. And in this area, nothing we have does work at all. And now something very interesting happens, because now we start to go from this end user focused innovation and start translating it into a technical problem. And then you go deeper and deeper, and it more and more becomes a technology problem that then goes like into research. Like one example we had, coming back to the beginning of the question, is we anticipate the amounts of data to become bigger and bigger. We will talk about exabytes of data. And we realized like the traditional way of using a database query to retrieve data is no longer going to work. We can't like every second query exabytes of data. That's just not going to work. That's not how a lot of this will work. So we might not like to query the data directly, but we train machine learning models to take decisions. We started to do this and realized, well, we're not having like 1 or 2 or 3 of those models, like we're having millions of those models. They're not like super complicated ones, but lots of them. And they run fully autonomously. So we have to check whether they're still good, whether we have to retrain them, what we have to do. And these are certainly all problems that academia can work well with, because we tell them, like we can formulate a research question. Say, can we automatically validate whether a machine learning model works or not? Or can we replace certain types of queries and some decisions taken that were usually taken based on querying data by using machine learning models to produce this output automatically, having the same quality? These are things that academia can work with very well. And they can find the research, they can introduce new research. The good thing is usually as a commercial business, you can provide them with a lot of data, anonymized, of course, so that nothing can happen with the data, and taking care that obviously there's no issues there. But then they have the massive data sets that they usually would not have. You can give them a research question, and you're still doing it with this idea in mind from the very beginning that you don't want to have people debugging code, looking at massive amounts of data, but really automatically resolving problems, building like these self-healing capabilities in there that you had in the beginning of your video. And I think that's how you really have to think about innovation. That's what we did. We created this video a long time ago where we had a voice assistant, and the voice assistant was proactively talking to developers, said, this is the problem that I discovered in your application, and by the way, I automatically fixed it for you. This was the starting point, and then we were spending years and years of building exactly this to really make it work. Again, not the science fiction version where everything fixes itself automatically, but gradually moving there, and then introducing new technologies along the way, and also identifying the limits, and then giving research or academia the time to develop solutions for that.
And I think most businesses have woken up to the fact that a digital transformation is a journey, not a destination that they can just tick off their bucket list and move on. And also the speed of technological change is moving at breakneck speed. It is hard to keep up with, but the reality is it's never going to move this slow again. So every business is armed with, challenged with thinking fast, building fast, failing fast, and having a mentality that accelerates the pace of digital innovation and ultimately drives that next wave of transformation. But are there any tips on how a business can move with that different mindset or adopt that different mindset?
Yeah, so something we adopted internally, because you talked, as you mentioned, digital transformation is not the goal. You're not at some point digitally transform and then everybody can go home or everybody can go on vacation. But people should take their vacations. So that's very important. It's always going to change, and again, the pace is increasing as we're working. So, or as we're adopting new technologies, because whenever you build something new, that's the amazing thing. It suddenly is a commodity that quickly. The better you build it, the more it is a commodity. I think we both are old enough to remember that there were times when going to an airport means you printed out stuff at home, then you went there like 2 hours in advance, and then you were like queuing up there in line and then catching a flight. Well, once we had like mobile apps and everything, we just checked in online, and we were just there 20 minutes before the flight because we had cabin luggage. We just could go through everything, and then suddenly those machines were not working, and you're like, what is this? I have to wait here in line. I mean, where are we? Is this Stone Age right now? What is this? Or like being somewhere and not knowing how to get a taxi. What do you mean I have to know what the local taxi company is and things like that? And and back to like the whole idea of think fast, build fast, and fail fast. I think what's missing in there is learn fast. Yeah. Which is the reason why you want to fail. So you don't want to fail for the sake of failing, but you want to feel people safe failing. I think that's very important. So I remember when we were moving also to like very fast iterations, and for some reason we stopped it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we moved back to like deploying quicker and quicker. So people started to feel a bit uneasy about it, and I asked them why. We were doing this, so we have been doing this now for almost 2 years. We're just stopping it for a couple of weeks. It feels different right now. So you have to create this safety net. That's also why we invest so much in what we call self-healing and self-repairing applications. So the developer must have the security, the business must have the confidence. If you push something into production, if you release a new feature that's not working as supposed, then it's automatically taken back. There is a way back. And there is a way back to safety, back to the old version. On top of this, how you can schedule this in. So internally, we use a lot of planning based on OKRs, objectives and key results, which is something a lot of people do. But I also break my objectives down into these 3 areas. Like, what do we need to do to help people today? What do we need to start right now so that we're able to help people tomorrow? And what do we need to start to investigate so we have answers for the problems which we might see in 1 to 2 years? And we are very explicit about this. And this is very important. So often you see people say, yeah, we have an innovation department. So I say, what are they doing? They're coming up with new ideas. Mm-hmm. Ideas for what? I always say a good innovation department is overthinking how they can put the business out of business by building something that's significantly better, and that your current organization or your current engineering team would not know how to respond if the competition would release this right now. And then some people say this might be a bit of an aggressive approach, but then I ask them, what do you think your competition is trying to do right now? Yeah. And don't you rather want to have this competition in-house? So I think it's really the key for like all of this is giving people the safety that they can't put the business at risk by releasing a feature too quickly, by maybe taking the wrong choices. And we have all these opportunities. If we see that a new website design is resulting in less conversions or worse behavior for people, we have things like feature flags, or we can automatically switch it back. If we really detect that some piece of software is not working, we should have the ability to build like rollbacks to disable certain features, to fall back to other approaches. And this is something that I think today, in order to like drive this innovation, is no longer a nice to have. Things that the Googles, the Netflixes, the Facebooks are doing. This is common engineering practice right now. And honestly, if you don't get this done, then don't invest in innovation. Like people, we do this, but we just do the innovation stuff, but not the hard work. Yeah. That's like, we're going to run the marathon, but we skip the training because the training is kind of tedious. You do the training first. So you create first the engineering organization, the whole environment, so that this is possible. And then you move into move into this fast acceleration mode, because otherwise people will burn out, they will be scared, they will never dare to do really interesting things, because they know they might just put the company at risks, and who wants to do that?
And of course, if anybody listening is spending their time scrolling down or doom scrolling, as they call it, the social feeds with all those doom and gloom stories and 24-hour rolling news channels, thankfully we're seeing a much more hopeful view of the future. And I'm curious, as businesses are all collaborating, working together, bringing in academia as well, building that future and bringing that vision of 5 years closer. What excites you about the future of innovation? What makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning?
What excites me really is that there's just so much things we can work on.
Yeah.
And yes, we have to work on a lot of things. I think we have to make a lot of things better. And as bad as the last 1.5 to 2 years have been, I think we also have to learn that there's way more that's possible than we believe it is. We just have to start doing it. And I think there's now with people just try more. They're more open. They're doing things they might not have done before. They're more comfortable being out of their comfort zone, if this makes like any sense. Because they were out of their comfort zone. They have been out of their comfort zone for the last 2 years, most likely. And I think there's several news articles from other psychologists that say that usually after like events like this, people like to take more risks. They try more because they're like, whatever. I mean, after everything that happens, safety is not the best strategy anyways. And I also like that people are and I think but also has grown a lot, which is interesting because we obviously did not spend so much time together. I think that whole feeling of community has grown, and that feeling of personal interaction, and the value of personal interaction. There's this old saying, at least in Austria, you start to really value things once you don't have them anymore. Mm-hmm. And like this combination, like people getting together, really wanting to build something for the better. And that's also what we see in our collaboration, like where we started a lab directly at the university, where people just came over. Yes, they want to work on it. And for me, like one of the great things is usually you had like applicants for roles that were asking you about the job or the opportunity that you have there, what you can work on, what their background is. And recently I have been in some of those job interviews where somebody's coming in and say, I know what you're doing. I have this great idea what else you could be doing. And it might be a totally stupid idea. I mean, this was for a research job as well. But you could use it that way. And I have some ideas here. And this is a different way of conversation that I really like. And I think that's what's hopefully going to happen as we get back to more of a life as we used to have it. That people say, well, it's just right. I mean, don't overplay it to be too much on to have everything too much secure and to be too much on the secure side. Just try things, and again, like valuing this interactions. Like for me, I usually spend a lot of time traveling, which I didn't do over the last 1.5 years. But I still was working with a lot of people who have never met in person. Yeah. We work very closely. We have like very close contacts. We have built communities and a lot of collaboration with other teams around it. And it feels like we know each other and we can work well together. I think we have also learned this, and there's way more opportunity to interact there.
Absolutely love that, and love chatting with you today. But one of the things that I've changed since we last spoke, and almost a bit of an antidote to lift people up when they're surrounded by doom and gloom, is I ask each of my guests to share a song or piece of music that has inspired them in their career, or just when they're feeling a bit low, something that gets their head in the zone and helps them think they can achieve the impossible, or before, just to inspire them before they go on stage. Is there a song that means anything to you that we can add to our Spotify playlist?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of songs. I think it always depends on the situation. So interestingly, I like this classics 80s type of music, like the Halt and Catch Fire type of music, when I really like to be in the zone. And there's like a lot of bands like Cabaret Nocturne and others that are playing this. Like for me, this is like really this in the zone music. Stage song, I would still go with something very classic, like a Led Zeppelin, When the Levee Breaks, or something like that.
That sounds good, man. Yeah, we'll have that. No room for Falcao though, right?
He was a great artist, but I think it's not really straight, that type of stage music. The lyrics are, I don't know how well they are translated to English, but they're kind of like interesting. So they actually go deeper than you might think that they do. But yeah.
No, I remember him well. I was a big fan back in the 80s. Vienna Calling, was it Genie, Rock Me Amadeus? Yeah, I'm a fully subscribed member. But
did you ever watch the movie?
Yes, Amadeus.
No, not Amadeus. There is a movie about Falco. I don't know whether it's developed in English. Yes, and it's a famous Austrian actor, and it was like really about his life. It's more like a biography. I don't know whether they ever translated it to English, but it was quite famous a couple of years ago. And it's really interesting, like about his career. And today talked about like expectations and how everything was accelerating. And the thing is what he said, like when you're getting successful, like success is, he made like that, might not quote it entirely correctly, but he said like success is a curse because people always expect you to be better. People always expect you to be more. Yeah. And then there was it at some point in his career, and when he said the only thing I can do out there is I can be worse than yesterday because I don't know how to be better anymore.
Oh man, that's
it's an interesting one. So if I can find it, I'll send you a link. Definitely interesting to watch. But I think it also ties now back nicely to digital transformation. That things not going slower. Yeah. And what you did well today, people expect you to do well tomorrow as well, and it's getting a commodity. Yeah. So that's the other side of success and how we were accelerating. So I think that's a nice end and a nice tie back here to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, beautiful moment to end the podcast on. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening wants to find you online, contact your team at Dynatrace or just find out more information about Dynatrace. What's the best starting point?
Yeah, obviously about Dynatrace per se, that's the Dynatrace website and the Dynatrace Twitter account. There's also research.dynatrace.com on research-specific topics. And if you want to reach me personally, just best go to Twitter at Alois Reitbauer. My DMs are usually open to nice people. And simply feel free to reach out with anything you might be interested in talking about.
Excellent. Well, I think so much of what you've talked about today will resonate with people listening all over the world, especially around thinking fast, building fast, and as you said, learning fast as well. It's important that we keep that in there. But more than anything, just thank you for the update. We'll hopefully meet again soon, but thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Bye.
With access to real-world business experience and first-hand knowledge of the type of challenges organisations are trying to solve, academics could then create solutions that truly change the world, instead of just sitting around developing theory that then takes years to be tested and get out there in the real world. So I found today's interview nothing short of inspirational, because that approach can help foster that think fast, build fast, learn fast mentality that accelerates the pace of digital innovation and drives the next wave of transformation. Food for thought indeed, but over to you. If you're in the business world or academia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we've talked about today. My door is open to each and every one of you as always. My email is techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find over 1,700 podcast interviews. And I think we've covered just about every topic you can imagine in the last 5 years. But that's it for today's episode, so a big thank you as always for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.